Welcome to Taxpayer Alert. I'm Al Segalla. I'll be your moderator. I'm also president of the Calaveras County Taxpayer Association, and we love bringing interesting people to these shows. And this show is no exception. We have Eric Eisenhammer, who was formerly with Howard Jarvis Taxpayer Association, and also he works on his own communications business called Dauntless Communications, and he's always into something to help the taxpayers. Welcome, and thank you for coming.
Thank you, Al. And just a quick correction, I am still involved with the Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association. Okay. In fact, I run their social media, I do their web design stuff, I work on campaigns they sponsor. So I do other things. Everything else you said was exactly right. But no, I've been involved with them for 10 plus years now, and they're a great organization that I'm proud to be associated with.
You got a lot of skills.
Thank you.
Appreciate that. Do you do gardening?
Gardening? Yeah, I do, actually.
Me too.
It's, I don't have a lot of spare time. So for a long time, my yard had this big stretch of dirt on one side and then this other stretch of dirt. It was clean. I mean, I mowed the yard, but other than that, you could tell there's either a busy dude or a dude that doesn't care in that house. But I had a fundraiser for a conservative candidate a couple of months ago, maybe longer, I don't know, time blurs together for me. But I was like, I gotta get my house looking legit. And I planted a row of flowers on the left. I got them really cheap at Home Depot. If you don't know this, there is clearance flowers. They're like way cheap. Some of them look like they're about to die, but some of them don't. And I have not thought of myself as a green thumb kind of guy, but they're still alive.
Oh, I buy phony flowers without guilt.
What kind?
Phony.
Phony flowers.
Silk flowers.
I looked.
They
no joke.
look real.
I looked into that, and there are. I was worried. I was worried that they wouldn't look real, but I looked into that.
Well, Eric, it looks like we have a number of things to discuss, and one of the things we're concerned about is high gas prices. You have some comments on that?
Absolutely. And that's been an issue that I've just been involved with for a long time, and I'm really interested in. Founded something called the Institute for Gas Price Reduction that you can find on Facebook and online. And it's got a lot of members to it, 17,000 people on the Facebook page. So it's something people care about. People are really concerned about it. And the politicians in California, I believe that Gavin Newsom and President Biden have a responsibility for the surge in gas prices that we've seen recently.
Yeah, most definitely.
You had Joe Biden canceled the Keystone XL pipeline.
Right.
In California, we have a raft of anti-oil legislation that is in the works right now. California used to be, or still is, I believe, one of the top 5 oil producers in America. But other states like Texas and the Dakotas, where oil production has been a main industry, there it's exploding. Oil production has surged in other states where they have energy resources. In California, where that's an industry that provides a lot of jobs and provides, the fuel for our cars, our production has gone down. So we're getting lower and lower on that list. And the politicians in Sacramento, they're proud of this. They brag about how we're going to eliminate the oil industry entirely within a decade or so. And that, for $4.50 a gallon, I believe, is our average price of gas right now. And it is going to get worse. It's going to get worse unless the policies change.
We're starting to see stickers on gas pumps that say, thank Biden.
Well, yeah. And let me just tell you one other thing. This reconciliation bill that Democrats are considering in Congress. That's the official name for that $3.5 trillion spending plan
Right.
that they're considering. There's oil taxes and energy taxes and taxes on plastic that are in that bill. And that is really a betrayal of the promise to not raise taxes on people who make less than $400,000 a year. That's going to result in higher prices for fuel. It's going to result in higher prices for feedstock, and higher prices for farmers means higher prices for all of us when we go to the grocery store.
Well, that's not good news right now. And one of the things that was a concern to me, I really was supporting this recall of the governor, and then when that didn't fly, it's kind of depressing. But on the other hand, there might be a better way to replace him in the future.
Well, I feel like sometimes when I talk about politics, I think it's the nature of the stuff that I work on. People say, what you just said, well, it's not good news. And then they wonder, like, why am I a relatively happy guy? Or at least I come across like I am. But it doesn't have to be this way. One thing that we're lucky for is that it wasn't an act of God. It wasn't a natural disaster or hurricane that caused these situations. It was acts of our government that caused it. So the recall, even though we lost, which was really disappointing to me too, it was also very inspiring.
Yeah.
I was involved with Kevin Kiley's campaign, and I saw people from around the country, around the country, honestly. So that is right. Not even just around the state, but around the country who were inspired by the recall.
Yeah.
I had a dude that came to volunteer for us. So he was volunteering in my office because he knew that he was just trying to find out who was involved with this recall, who's involved with this campaign. And this guy was from New York State. And he found me somehow, talked to a person who talked to a person, managed to get a hold of me, and I talked to him about Kevin Kiley, and he flew out. This is all at his own expense, just the guy's doing it as a volunteer, but flew out at his own expense to spend a week volunteering for Kevin Kiley. So that was the type of thing that we saw. We saw people getting involved for the first time, getting inspired to make a difference. I mean, I think 2 million people signed those petitions, which is a pretty extreme thing to do. 2 million people to decide, like, hey, like, I'm not just not in political agreement with this governor, but I'm going to actually take action to sign a petition to remove him. So that says something about a new level of motivation that I think we're seeing that we haven't seen for a long time.
Yeah, that's true. It's kind of interesting. A lot of times we're reacting to things that the left or the Marxists are doing. They want to create a socialist America, and we're trying to fight that off. And it's a really negative thing. It's hard to be happy, but in the Constitution, one of the things that we have in the way of opportunities is the pursuit of happiness.
Yeah.
So if the goal is really to be happy, it follows that prosperity definitely encourages happiness, and prosperity is always based on freedom.
Absolutely.
So the reason for freedom is happiness. So if we want to be happy, you got to support freedom. Now I think even some of our friends on the left can grasp that concept if you catch them in a good mood.
I think so. I think our friends on the left have some inkling that something might be wrong.
Yeah.
And you really wonder, first of all, for me at least, this is just my own personal story, but I'm a believer. So for me, that's why, or is one of the reasons why I feel like, they can take away my personal freedom, they take away the freedom of my body, but they can't take away the freedom that's in my soul. So
Right.
I think that whatever happens politically, no matter how horrible it gets, I have family that came from Eastern Europe and lived under tremendous persecution. But the Bible says, "He who the Son sets free is free indeed." So that's what's true for me. But then I also want to say for our politicians, Gavin Newsom right now is in Scotland, and he is participating in a global warming summit. And I just saw him there. He was bragging about the amount of electric cars that we produce in California. And what I was wondering, because I feel like he left out a very important part of that equation. He's bragging about the amount of electric cars that we've produced, but he failed to mention that his high tax and heavy regulatory policies drove Tesla out of California.
That's a good point. Most people don't realize that. Well, when you talk about freedom, our Constitution is pretty wise and thoughtful. In the Fifth and 14th Amendments, they specify life. We have rights to life, liberty, and property, and that's the key word when we talk about freedom. If you respect those three rights, you have free enterprise and you have prosperity, and then that follows. Then you have happiness.
Yes, one thing that I think we don't fully understand, not you and me, but like we collectively in our society, one thing that I think we don't fully understand when people talk about socialism versus capitalism, sometimes we hear that thrown around. And my grandma lived under socialism in the Soviet Union. And it was not always that way. It was not always communist in Eastern Europe. So back in the olden days, my great-grandparents actually built a factory. And then when the Soviet Union expanded and took over some areas that were next to it, then communism got applied. And people would like to believe, because I think it suits their ideological agenda, that communism is just an economic system.
No.
It's not, right, exactly. When they control this, the economic aspect, when they control the money and the property, they control everything.
Well, Eric, we got a chance now to discuss some of the reform measures in California. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, let's talk about it. Well, there's several. There's several that are on the ballot, or maybe on the ballot as of right now, that are in the signature gathering stage. So one is a measure to give parents school choice. So to take the money that they're spending in their taxes that now are just decided to go to the public schools, they would be able to take that money and use it for a school of their choice.
I remember that. We had one years ago, and I worked really hard on
Really?
it, but it didn't succeed.
I will probably, I don't know how long ago that was. I don't remember that.
It was
Maybe I was
Prop
a kid.
84.
Was that
I think it was Prop 84.
Prop
Back
84?
maybe 20 years ago.
Okay. I was probably like in high school or so. Probably don't. So yeah, I don't remember that, but I'm gonna guess there's a special interest to probably put.
The teachers union.
Yeah, exactly. They probably put millions of dollars into opposing that. So that is one. There's also a taxpayer reform measure that I don't know a lot about because it was just introduced, but I do know that the business community is supporting it, so that should be another positive one. And then, there's another one out there too that I wanted to mention that.
Repeal of the death tax.
Well, that's one too. Yes, and that is a positive one. So that might be it. That might be the last one I was thinking of. Repeal the death tax, and that's actually one I'm involved in too. So that is one that a lot of people aren't aware of this, but I'm sure you were aware of this, but the general public was not. That Prop 19, which was approved last year, had a inheritance tax built into it. So there were some good things, in my opinion. There were some good things about Prop 19. Prop 19 gave people the ability to transfer their Prop 13 values. I think only senior citizens, but it gave senior citizens the ability to transfer their Prop 13 base value if they move. So that's a good thing. It also had certain things to help fire victims that were also positive. But what they didn't tell us, and millions and tens of millions of dollars were spent advertising this measure, what they didn't tell us was that there was an inheritance tax built into it. So that inheritance tax, cumulatively, is going to be a $1 billion a year tax. So pretty massive tax that they neglected to mention, of course, because, they know that a lot of people don't want that, and it's still only narrowly passed. It passed about 52 to 48. Mm-hmm. So what the Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association is proposing, and I'm involved, I built the website, and I've been helping support the campaign. What the Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association is proposing is to keep the good parts in place. So there were a few good parts to Prop 19, like the Prop 13 portability, for example, or the fire victim protections. This is not going to eliminate any of those good aspects that people might have liked, but it is going to eliminate that $1 billion inheritance tax that was hidden in the measure that most people probably didn't even know they were voting for in the first place.
That's good. Now, is there a website that you'd recommend people go to?
Yes.
Now, get your pencil now, because we're going to give you a website that you can continue the show for hours and hours by going to that website.
Yes, you'd have hours and hours of fun on that site. I think I built it, so I think it's pretty nice. Reinstate 58.
Reinstate 58.
HJTA.org.
JTA.
No. HJTA.org.
HJTA.org. Howard Jarvis Taxpayer Association.
That's right.
Okay.
So go to reinstate58.hjta.org to find information on this. Or if you just go to the main HJTA site, hjta.org, you will see a big button on the homepage directing you to learn more about this particular thing, to reinstate 58.
Now, you've done some work on another thing, is you're trying to help taxpayers protect themselves from special interest monopolies.
Right.
And you have a website for that one too, and it's a coalition you set up, and it's called stopmonopolies.org.
That's right.
All right.
That's also
something. Did you get a chance to write that down?
Stopmonopolies.org.
Okay, stopmonopolies.org.
Yeah, that's another thing people should definitely be aware of. And this is now, we're not talking about one of the good ones. Now we're talking about something that I believe is negative for taxpayers.
Yeah, well, one of them in particular is the special interest gaming system in Sacramento. Whereby the tribal casinos want to use the force of government to establish a monopoly and control all gambling in California. And by doing so, they exclude themselves from the costs that are involved with it, and they also don't protect their workers for their workers' rights. Is that correct?
That's correct. And some people aren't even aware, but we do have 200 casinos in California that are not tribal operated. And
I didn't know that.
Yes, we do. And some are pretty big too. There's one in LA, for example, in Hawaiian Gardens, that is a pretty big casino. So these are all over the state, just as tribal casinos are. And what the tribes have backed now is a proposal to give themselves a monopoly on sports betting, on roulette, and on several other types of gaming. And they've also included a provision in it that if you're familiar with citizen attorney general lawsuits, they've given a provision, they put a provision in their proposal that would enable frivolous lawsuits to be filed against their competitors and put their competitors out of business.
Oh man, that's pretty sick.
It is, really is.
Now, that probably doesn't have a number, but it is qualified for the ballot.
That's right. There's no number yet, but this has qualified on the ballots. And what I think it's important people understand, and this is actually backed up by the Legislative Analyst Office, who's looked at the costs of this measure, that if the tribes are able to shut down their competitors do pay taxes. So the tribes, because they're on tribal land, they're tax exempt. These other casinos, these non-tribal casinos, they pay taxes, which cumulatively amounts to about $500 million a year. If the tribes are able to shut down their non-tribal competitors, they also eliminate the tax revenue and the jobs that their non-tribal competitors provide. So here is what should concern every single taxpayer in California. What is the state of California going to do about that $500 million of revenue they're going to lose? Are they just going to, reduce their spending and, tighten their belts in order to make up for the lack of revenue? We know better than that. They're not going to do that.
Yeah.
It's going to lead to $500 million and more taxes on all of us.
I kind of think that we may have passed a time in history where we need to recognize another nation within our nation. We need to recognize individual Native Americans as having rights to their life, liberty, and property, but not to be subject to losing those rights to another group. And because in doing that, we're oppressing those people. So we need a long-term solution where the tribes can be tribes in name only, but have no more governmental protection as a tribe any more than any other corporation. To me, that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that I think there are some reforms that are needed on tribal lands, and that's, it's kind of outside the scope of the initiative itself, but it's really interesting. It's the kind of thing that I stay up late and I Google topics that I'm just interested in. And there are some really interesting examples of tribal success stories of tribes establishing businesses. So this is just my own personal opinion, but I think that one thing that is extremely important to helping uplift the tribes is to foster the development of businesses and jobs on tribal reservation land. Not only gaming, but other types of industry. So there's a few that have really been successful, and what they've done is they've just established businesses of their own that are diverse and are not just dependent on a casino. And I think that that's really the way of the future.
Yeah.
Same as for all of us. Entrepreneurship and hard work.
I like the idea of tribal members, individual tribal members and families being able to own land in their own name as people.
Well, and I think that is part of the key to empowering people.
Yeah.
I think that when people aren't able to own something, I just think that it's hard to, you think about like just owning your own home or owning your own, if you have a business and you own the property where your business is. Because I own my own home, and I also own the property where my business is. And I'm kind of a tinkerer. I like to go to Home Depot, and I like to do that stuff. And I'll invest my time and my energy in trying to make the properties that I own into something beautiful and something great. But if that was owned by somebody else, I don't really know I do know. I would not do that if that was owned by somebody else. Why would I spend the thousands of dollars and all the time trying to make something beautiful if it's not even mine? They could kick me out of it or raise my rent.
Yeah, that's for sure. So I don't know, the tribal groups are extremely powerful, and they have a lot of money.
Yeah.
And the chances of opposing them may be hard to do because they can spend so much money on advertising and donations to political campaigns and such. It's almost like a teachers union.
That is true. And that is, first of all, one of the reasons why people should oppose the measure itself.
Yes.
Because the tribes are one of California's most powerful special interests,
Yeah.
and giving them this monopoly would only increase their power. But I also would say that having worked on campaigns for like 10, 12 years now, that I've worked on a lot of projects where we've won only because our cause was right. And that's not to say that this Taxpayers Against Special Interest Monopolies coalition that is opposing this measure isn't going to spend substantial money trying to stop this measure. They are.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I also believe that, and I have examples, I don't know how much time we have, but I have examples of things that legislators and citizens have been persuaded just because the cause was right and just.
Now the taxpayer, now the website is stopmonopolies.org.
That's correct.
All right. Thank you for watching Taxpayer Alert. See you next time.